Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the 1957-58 U.S. Championship. On the white end, Bobby Fischer, playing against four-time New York State champion Arthur Feuerstein. All right, the opening we work with here is a King's Indian attack, same sides castles game, some support for this e5 advance, queen and rook supporting it now, e5 sure enough, knight kick back, and some control over any knight jumps here with c3. Black has space on the queen side, will look to play on this wing, goes with b5 here, knight f1, b4, and from here bishop f4. Now black's continuation from here is queen a5. This gives Fischer an opportunity to keep the queen side a bit more locked. How the computer wants to play it says first open up the queen side a little bit, and only then consider queen a5 or rook b8, bishop a6. These are the moves it has its eye on. How it's played in this one, the queen goes to a5, and she turns out to be a bit misplaced. Fischer's reply here is c4. In general, okay, let's try and, as white, keep the queen's wing shut down as much as possible and play on the side of the board where we have space here on the king's side. All right, c4 it is. Knight c7 sort of turns out to be a nothing move. The knight is currently dominated by a pawn on e8, and it's sort of the same story here, controlled by the c-pawn. What the computer has its eye on, bishop b7, rook d7, and then this doubling on the d file, a timely capture, and then some action on these d file squares. Okay, not how it's played here. Knight c7, h4, queen b6, h5, and from here we see b3. Now, from this point on, for many of black's next moves, the computer is recommending h6 as top, even if this top move h6 is played. I want to map out a few moves that white could consider here. It's still going to be problematic for black. You could consider g4, knight g3, and a g5 break. The g file will be opened up. It's not unrealistic to think that white would have the time to play king h2 and hop to this opened or half-open g file. Black will still experience problems even with this top move. Okay, h6 never played here by black. He goes with b3. Fischer keeps the queen side shut. Follow-up capture on c4. This here is the only weak point really in Fischer's camp. For the moment, it's secure. All right, knight f to h2, rook a to c8. At first glance, seems like, is the rook really any better positioned on c8 when compared to a8? Maybe. Maybe after knight d4 and a capture on d4, black recaptures with the pawn, and the rook would spring to life. There's no guarantee, however, that Fischer will take on d4. If you can work around a black knight once it arrives on d4, you would ideally like to do just that and make this earlier move. Don't justify that rook a to c8 move. Follow-up from here is h6, g6. What has happened with this pawn advance to h6? A hole has been created on f6. This has already been a great success for Fischer. He will now look to work his pieces into this weakened f6 square. From here, what do? Try and get rid of the number one defender of these dark squares, black's dark square bishop. Follow up knight d4, and you don't have to take. Fischer is able to work around this piece, not justify rook a to c8. He plays queen e3 here, and black's response is bishop captures bishop. Now, here's a question I had. What if black lands a massive fork? What if knight c2 is there, hitting all of these majors? What did he have prepared? Well, he was prepared to play down the exchange, and pretty much crush black on these dark squares on the king side. I mean, what would you do now as black? Bishop is unprotected. Your options are to capture or maybe support the bishop. I'll touch on each. If, let's say, the bishop is supported, this is a pretty clean continuation. That's going to hurt. Rook is hit, and there's also a mate in one. It'll be Fischer, who's soon playing up the material, up a minor piece. And in the case of, let's say, bishop captures bishop in this position, the knight recaptures, threatening a mate in two, a couple different mate in twos. You would have to defend f7. Let's say rook f8, and now this other knight has some fun here on this f6 square. What do you do here? There really isn't a meaningful move for black at this stage. If you try knight to e8, the knight hops in with check. If you take the knight, it'll be a mate in two. This is a very dangerous pawn. Some other move, difficult to even put on. A move, let's say bishop takes c4, there's a knight check, king h8, and you could swipe this pawn with the f knight. Rook is hit, and once more there's this idea to go in for mate. So it's probably not going to work out if black tries to land this big fork here. You're getting crushed on the king side here as black. It's bishop captures bishop in this one. Queen captures. Knight e8. Knight g4. Knight f5. Okay, from here we see some defense on the queen side. There's no rush on the king side here by Fischer. This is not going anywhere. This knight could jump in at any moment. He's taking some time out to defend. Queen c7, knight d2. This pawn is now unprotected because of this last move. Has an eye on maybe just scooping up the pawn, or maybe even hopping into e4. Okay, e4, f6. From here, rook d4 is played. I'd like to point out that this is a crushing position for white, even if the queens are no longer around. So let's say black tries to get the queens off. You could exchange and then collect this pawn right here. This is still a crushing position. This pawn remains a great thorn in black's side. Major pieces still around, back rank issues will still be present for black. Crushing position here without the queens. Okay, how it's played here, no queen e7, it's rook d4. Knight takes b3, rook takes c4. Rook exchange avoided. Eventually, this knight here will find its way into this e4 square. There we go, right about here. Rook takes rook, knight takes rook. Picturesque position right here. If you'd like to take a picture of this one, it would go a long way towards you remembering this game. I mean, what has happened to get to this point here? This has been a model game, a dark square strategy success. The blueprint here, put a pawn on e5. Launch your h-pawn to h6. What has happened after that? A hole has been punched into f6, and from there, direct every meaningful piece on that f6 square. The dark square bishop was directed on f6, eventually traded. Queen is now able to take up this wonderful post on g5, and look at these golden knights, both ready to pounce now on that weakened square. There's no defending this position. What's tried from here, bishop d3, knight g hops into f6. This here is black's best piece. By moving the g knight into f6, white is now ready to scare the knight away with g4. We see this as a follow-up. In the game, black moves the king. If this knight is captured, the way to recapture would be with the knight, landing a check. If you take with the queen, this would let black off the hook. There would be bishop captures knight, and then this very dangerous pawn on h6 can be scooped up. No more mate threat to worry about on g7. So the way to approach it would be, okay, in the event of knight takes knight, you're taking with the knight. In this one, it is king to h8. In comes g4. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. No time to take the knight now. The queen recaptures with check. There's a problem still on f5 to sort out. Knight d4 from here. Knight captures knight, and there's now no time to simply regain the piece. There's a mate in 2 threat after this last capture. Notice how black's knights have both been kicked away from their control over f6 and g7 within these last 2 or 3 moves. So this strategy here by Fischer has been a success. We're now seeing it in material form. He is up a bishop now at the end of all of this. Follow-up from here is queen to d8. This continuation carries out for just a little bit more. The finishing sequence still pretty neat here. We see a queen exchange, and it seems like maybe right around the corner, black is in fact going to be up the exchange. Knight is hit, and there's also this fork idea on e2. But after knight d6, white has a trick up his sleeve as well. Black does land the fork, tracks the rook, and then white hits right back with the fork of his own, tracking that rook on d8. In the end, we're looking at a bishop and pawn advantage, and this one plays on for just a few more moves, probably just out of momentum. And after knight to c6, black has finally had enough and resigned. A knight exchange is nearby, and if you avoid that, you're going to be losing even more material. A good point to go ahead and resign. So, what are your thoughts with this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.